That's my fatigue at 43 episodes of this podcast. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Picky Bees podcast. This is our 43rd episode, and it's time for a celebration for two big reasons. The first is because our fellow picky bastard Fran has had a lovely little girl about 10 days ago. To be honest, I'm told she's lovely. I'm not actually been able to see her yet, so I can't really confirm anything. So congrats to him and to Kirsten when he's listening to this. And the second celebration is that for the next 2 months at least, this podcast will now take a turn away from the kind of rage and ranting of Fran's profound grumpiness and also his highly flawed musical opinions, and towards a more joyous sort of state of play like my grumpiness and opinions. Great opinions, fantastic opinions. So thanks, Fran, for having the baby and giving us a break from your whining. That's appreciated. We usually have we have our minimally grouchy bastard with us, Matt. How you doing, Matt?
Hello.
How's it going?
Maybe I'll be extra grouchy.
Maybe you should take his place. Yeah. And we're going to welcome another of our editors from the PB's website, pickybees.com. Please go and see it. As a guest, his name is Sam. He's been on before. Hello, Sam. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Yeah?
Happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been like fifth appearance, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know.
It's been quite a while.
You lose count when it's so many.
And
so
it's so exciting.
memories.
Everyone's a roller coaster ride of emotions as well. It's kind of...
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So he's been on a few times, and he's also got possibly the most eclectic taste of anyone I know. Honestly, so good luck guessing where he's going to be positioning himself on all these albums we're going to be talking about. We'll see how it goes. I honestly can't guess. So we're going to be talking about 4 new albums, which are Adrian Younge, The American Negro, Rostam, Change Phobia, Gruff Rhys, Seeking New Gods, and Marina, Ancient Dreams in a Modern Land. And then we'll be talking about a classic, Stevie Nicks, The Wild Heart. And then Sam will be telling us about why he loves Janelle Monae. So let's get into it. First question is for Sam. Which album of these is the hardest to explain and why?
Well, I'm sure Matt will agree with me that we love these questions.
I spent a lot of time crafting these irritating questions.
And not vague at all.
Yep, that's great.
But actually, I had a very obvious answer for this in the end, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
And I would have to go with Gruff Rhys, Seeking New Gods.
Okay.
And I have to apologise up front. Now, I will call him Griff at some point because I've been typing Griff in to get this album for the last month, and every time get confused when it doesn't come up. So I was convinced he was called Griff. So
no, you failed at first. It's quite
failed
embarrassing for you, yeah.
So the reason I'd say it's the most difficult to explain is basically because I have no idea what this album is trying to be. I've read that it's supposed to be about a mountain, like a concept album about a mountain.
I don't know. I've not looked into that at all. As usual, I've done the research. Is that seriously what this be about?
Yeah, it's meant to be a concept album about a mountain. There's a mountain on the cover. Exactly. But there's nothing that seems to link any of this music together other than him as his voice. At times it's like the sort of thing that like an ancient rocker would release, and then at the gig like everyone sits down for these songs when they just wait for the hits, and then other times it's like kind of it goes between all of these different references I can hear of like. Some of it sounds like a lounge singer thing. Some of it sounds like kind of like chirpy, happy pop rock thing. Some of it, and then most of it is just endless kind of the same lyric over and over again. I just couldn't pin down what the point of any of this was. So that's how I took that question of most difficult to explain. I have lots of thoughts.
Okay.
But I don't know how any of that fits together for the same album.
That's a reasonable answer. That's not a bad answer. Way of explaining such a vague question. Not bad going. Sorry, did I cut you off? Do you want to say more?
Well, I can pick out some specific songs that I really didn't like.
Okay.
If that helps.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's allowed.
There was just songs like Hiking and Lightning, Everlasting Joy, and then there was that Can't Carry On song, which for the song called Can't Carry On, it just carried on saying that over and over again for 4 minutes. And then we get to the final track, Distant Snowy Peaks, which again just sort of seems to just say Distant Snowy Peaks and this was like 6 minutes. So
you're saying it's very focused then, very much on target.
I'm saying that there weren't that many lyrics in these songs.
Okay.
And they were just repeated over and over again, specifically about a mountain, I assume.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get anything more.
I wish I'd read up on it now. I never do the research, as everyone knows, but I really wish I'd read up on that, because if I knew it was about an album, I would have changed my perspective quite dramatically. That's fantastic. Okay. So, Matt, what did you think about this one?
This mountain revelation has kind of thrown me for a loop.
Exactly.
I'm sure I have not made this up. I'm sure that is correct. Someone can check.
No, it doesn't surprise me. Like, to me, it does feel. I get completely what you're saying. It does feel at points that he's shooting for something bigger and grander, which makes sense if he wants it to be an ode to some mountain or something. But
which it is. So we're good here then. It's fantastic in that case. That's your argument.
I'd say most of the time it's a miss. I know we've covered. I think we covered one of his albums before, and we've definitely, like, you talked about Super Fairies.
I did a while love on Super Fairies, yeah.
Yeah, but and like it still has. It feels very much like him. It has this kind of big warmth, I think, a lot of the times, but it does feel like a bit of a slog through most of the album, because it has just this very kind of down tempo beat a lot of the time.
Okay,
and it's not fun to listen to. I find like I want to listen to music that gives me energy, and this was like sapping it away at times.
That's quite harsh.
But I did quite actually the song Can't Carry On. That was one of the few I liked, apart from the one part in the song where they had there's a build in the middle, and he tries to go really like high with his voice, and it's just so grating. It doesn't work at all, and so. To me, it just ruined the whole vibe of the rest of the song, which, though it was very repetitive, they had some like cool backing vocals that made it seem a little bit different to everything else that was going on. Okay. But yeah, no, this isn't something I'm going to check out again.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So I mentioned a minute ago, I've done a Super Animals What I Love before. So I, in general, am a huge fan of his work, of Gruff's work, obviously with the band mostly. And after listening to the album a few times, I was kind of left with the question, like, how much more reinvention can I really hope from this guy as a musician, really? Because one of the things I loved about Super Fairies, as I mentioned in that What I Love, was how many times they changed direction, like from, say, Gorilla being a sort of dance album and then back into sort of prog rock, etc., etc. So I sort of, my expectations were quite high in that sense. So I expect him to reinvent himself again. And it is an album that I enjoyed, and it was sort of fun at points, and actually it was sometimes funny as well. I thought Hiking and Lightning as a title was quite witty, and this was quite amusing, and there's quite a few of those kind of lines in it. And also sometimes kind of beautiful. I thought the harmony work on some of it was quite good, which he's quite known for. But it felt like it couldn't really move past that to do something genuinely new, and that's what I was really looking for from him, and used to look for from Super Fairy Animals, in each album in turn, as it were. So so I suppose it was a bit of a letdown, I have to say, on the basis of that. I liked it, but I have kind of 9 great albums from this musician already. I would say 8 or 9 albums from this guy already and his band. So it doesn't really add to that collection. And at the same time, going back to that question, how can I expect 10 albums? That just seems, that's absurd in a way, to think of even more of that great music from him. I feel like he's kind of, I don't want to say come to the road, that's a bit harsh, because maybe you'll turn it around. But in terms of this particular one, it didn't offer anything new, and it wasn't. I won't be coming back to it, I don't think, really. Although this mountain thing has made me, that Sam mentioned, has made me reconsider. Maybe I'll go back at least once more and see if I can get a sense of what the hell, how it all pulls together. It's typically weird of him to pick that, though, as a topic. That's amazing, I think, in itself.
It's probably not true now, and I've just made this up. But I
must
honestly,
be true. We'll say
I'm
it's
sure
true.
that's what I've read. I'm sure.
Well, assume it's true because it's such a cool story. So yeah. With
all the things going on in the world, to write an album about a mountain seems a bit frivolous.
Music is frivolous. Come on, a lot of it.
What?
Actually, that's unfair. Not especially this list today. But anyway.
Wow, you realised you were on a music podcast, Nick.
Yeah, so but it's still meant to be. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I'll backtrack from that comment. Fair enough. All right, so that's Gruff Rhys. So now Matt has a question: of which album is easiest to explain and why?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try and answer it in a similar way to Sam, in the sense that I understood what this album was about entirely, in the sense that it was very clear on the topic it was about.
I love how you're holding off from saying what the album title was. This is great. Building up the
build some tension.
Excitement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect.
So yeah, we're going to talk about Adrian Younge and American Negro.
Okay.
And that's because this is an incredibly, it's like a very profound and challenging dissection of what it is to be black, and both historically and in modern day America. And like, I think it's a topic of conversation that is very much present right now, but has been also in the forefront for decades, centuries. And so I think it is a topic that's relatively easy to understand, but the way that it's actually put together on this album, I've never really quite heard anything like it before. It's really, really like expansive, with this kind of the way it mixes together the spoken word elements with the more, I guess, singing elements. There's actual songs, but then there's like full minutes where it's just him talking, and it's like a really interesting mixture of the two. But it is incredibly challenging to listen to because the kind of very calm and methodical way he's talking in the speaking sections adds to really the harrowing nature of like what he's talking to. So like at one point he's like just talking through, and he says, "I view the world through the stained glass of history that questions whether I'm even human." And then this sharply goes into like this soulful singing, and so just this juxtaposition is just like that is throughout, and it makes it. It's not a fun good time listen, that's for sure.
It seems fairly reasonable to say that.
Yeah,
won't dispute that.
But it's I got a lot from the album. I learned a lot as well, and I think it's just really creatively put together. When you have lots of different albums talking about this topic, to be able to grab someone's attention and add a new lens to it, I think it's really impressive.
Okay. So what do you want to do, Sam? Do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah. I feel so conflicted about this album. Like like you said, Matt, it is a difficult listen. Like, it's not something you can just jump into and give a cursory listen and you kind of understand how to listen to it. I found that juxtaposition between the spoken word and the music, it really felt like they were very separate, and that frustrated me a little bit, because I would be listening and it feels a bit stop-start. There's no music in the background of when he's talking, which gives more of impact to what he's saying, but also kind of broke up the flow of the music that I was enjoying.
Interesting.
And he's clearly sharing his experience and calling out these things, and that is great. And I get why there's so much to get from this. But I did the unthinkable. And feel free to never let me back on this podcast after doing this.
Take a vote at the end, Sam.
I did the unthinkable, and I made a playlist of just the music.
Oh,
and I listened to that.
That is actually outrageous.
Exactly. I said this, and I've literally written,
wow.
Feel free to never invite me back. And I actually ruined the album for myself.
Oh. But your music experience was better then, you're saying? The actual experience was better in that respect.
So what happened was I ended up realising that all of the songs blended into each other without those stop starts,
right.
which then made me go, well, is this like a long jam session? And the album just sort of then, you realize how similar all of the music is to each other. And I felt that it didn't really go very far from where it starts musically. And that bit I kind of struggled with, because then it kind of ruined the bits that I thought I really enjoyed about the music, and I started missing the words. And then I went back to listen to it the previous way, and I still wasn't getting it. So I think me intentionally ruining the album, trying to make my experience better, made it much worse.
Right.
So I'm really conflicted. I feel like I've been on a real journey with this album, trying to figure out how I can engage with it. And I think in the end, there's been quite a few other albums that have sort of, not as directly as this, but have talked about these things and talked about them in the music themselves. Like, you think about like the Salt records and even like Kendrick stuff, and then even something like the Michael Kiwanuka album. It's the musically they're quite similar, and I feel like they just achieve a musical depiction of that much better than this album does, which feels a lot more like a spoken word performance, which if that's what they're going for, then that's fine. And it certainly works in that respect. But as an album, I don't know if I'd go back and listen to this much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the point there is the point is the spoken word. And so cutting that out, I imagine, because it's almost like when you go to the musical parts, that's like you're coming up for air.
Yeah, exactly.
And getting your like break and relief from the intensity. And it reminded me a lot of like church. Sorry. It reminded me a lot of church with like the speaking elements, and then the like you're singing, and then you speak, and then you sing.
Yeah.
Don't expire on the mic, please, Matt.
I'll do my best not to.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. We don't want any deaths in this podcast. Okay, shall I jump in?
Yeah, do it.
So generally speaking, in these 43 episodes, Fran has managed to annoy me at least once every time. And he's done so again with this pick. I think this was his pick, wasn't it? And he did so deliberately to make, because it's so difficult, an album to review. And I'm sure he's sniggering about that as he listens to us now, once I finish recording all this. Because it is almost impossible to get an easy, digestible version of a review of this album. So I think I'm going to do, for me, I think I have to do sort of give good value for money and do two reviews on this album in a way. One is the academic one and one is the musical one. I understand he was actually a professor at one point, if I saw that correctly. Or certainly he's obviously extremely thoughtful and clever about this topic. So I would say the academic side of this review is that the album is really thoughtful, clever, intellectual and profound. A sort of a political treatise really on being black in America and how it's sort of wrapped up in an entire cultural system of oppression and systematic abuse across a wealth of areas and the kind of elision of identity. And I found all that really, really fascinating and profound and often quite moving. And so in that sense, I think it was extremely powerful and successful, because I think my sense was that was the message you wanted to get across. I would assume so, and I think it did so very, very well in both the spoken word parts and in the lyrics of the musical parts as well. If I look at it as a musical piece, I suppose it's a little bit different perspective, which is it's a good mix of a few different genres, which I really liked, most leading towards sort of the soul scene of what seemed like the 70s to me. It has some more and less effective actual musical sort of, I don't know if they're jams, as Sam was suggesting, or they're sort of pieced together more sort of studiously, but there's some that work better and some that work not as well. But I suppose it made me feel in the end, when I was sort of stuck between these two places, it made me reflect again, as we've had this conversation before, I think in past episodes, what's this podcast here for? I mean, ultimately it's a musical podcast and we're reviewing musical work. And I think if other than sort of our sort of aggressive moaning, our function is to review the music on these albums. And in that sense, this album, I think, is very solid, very well put together, but it's outclassed by, for example, Salt that Sam mentioned, and I think Kendrick's a good example as well. From a production standpoint, I think it's not flawless. It has these really interesting. It's kind of I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it has this really interesting sort of 70s style of production. I don't know if that was intentional, and if it was, then that's really amazingly done. It's so perfectly done. But it ended up sounding for me on the basis of that to be a bit sort of blanketed and distant musically, in terms of audio, and as if it's being sort of pulled from the past. And I found that clarity, that lack of clarity sometimes to be a bit distancing for me from getting into the music. Like, say, the Salt, for example, which I think is, going back to that, it is so exquisitely produced, is so present in your face. That's not with equipment there that they couldn't have replicated in the 70s. So if he was trying to reach back to that 70s and do it in a production level as well, then that's a masterstroke in a way. But just musically speaking, for me, it made me feel a bit more distant from it. So I think it's an album that everyone should hear, in my opinion. I think it's very, very profound, but I don't know that musically I absolutely love it. That's how I would end up characterising it. So don't know if that makes sense to you too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think your Salt comparisons are, like, I also wrote down Salt, but I think more what he's aiming, getting to your ideas, like what you're talking about the production. I think Gil Scott's a better comparison of what he's maybe aiming for with the loose jazz with the spoken word.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's that one then. Should we move on? What should we do? Let's look at, maybe I'll start one, shall I? Let's talk about Marina. Just picking one randomly from the remaining list. Ancient Dreams in the Modern Land. So 43 episodes in, this is the kind of album I'm supposed to hate, I've written down. And mostly I do. For a start, so I'm kind of fulfilling. Yeah, don't disappoint. Fulfilling the prophecy there. I mean, obviously, it's a dance/disco kind of album, which is always going to be a massive uphill struggle for me, and nobody should be surprised by that who's listened to this podcast before. I think it's has a lot of political polemic in it as well, which is okay. And I think this is interesting. We come to this one right after talking about the American Negro. It really struggled in the face of that being on the same playlist as the American Negro to make political comments that felt like they had enough weight behind them to be worthwhile. It felt like it was. It was overstating it to say facile, but it felt like it was not enough weight to be worth the kind of points that are being made in this music. And in that sense, I didn't connect to me sort of politically, and it didn't, obviously, musically. I mean, in a way, I'm not able to judge disco or dance music, really. So, in a sense, I'll sort of shut up and let more qualified people decide what they think about it, musically speaking. But it was very energetic, mostly, very polished, very clean, well produced in terms of structure and stuff. And it didn't really move me at all, I'm afraid. So I haven't got a hell of a lot more to say than that, to be honest. So, Sam, why don't you jump in on this one?
Yeah, I picked this one because I kind of have this back and forth with Marina. She's obviously been making music for a long time in the pop space. First as Marina and the Diamonds back in early 2010s, maybe earlier than that. I don't know. But she's had quite a few albums at this point, and I think I've listened to them all, and I've never really got her as an artist or her kind of position in pop. But I picked this because the kind of songs that had been coming out before it came out, it felt like she was really reaching for something a bit more direct with her lyrics and a bit more kind of, here we go, I'm talking about this thing and this is what it is.
So the political and cultural stuff, sorry to cut you off, the political and cultural stuff is not, it's kind of new, you're saying, to what she's done before.
No, okay. She's done things before like this, but never anything at this kind of scale of. And to be honest, when I'm saying that, I'm only really talking about like the first 4 songs on the album, which I feel like that's probably my biggest issue with the record, is that it starts really really strong in that respect, and it starts really immediate. And I think the first opening 4 songs kind of set this stall out of, wow, this is going to be 10 songs of kind of going for it. This is like not just upbeat, but like kind of this is straight to the point lyrically. She's kind of taking no shit. She's going for it, and musically, this is really kind of energetic pop music. I find it weird that you would describe this as dance/disco.
No,
because it's not at all to me. Marina's kind of always had this weird space where she's seen as like indie pop. She's never really seen as like out and out pop, and her last record, Love and Fear, was really electronic pop.
I don't know any of that work at all, but I can't believe this is in any way indie. This seems
yeah. But when I say indie, I don't mean like with loads of kind of band and guitars and stuff. I just mean she's always been on that kind of outsider, kind of alternative. I'm part of the cool pop. I'm not like commercial pop. She's never really broken through in a massive way in terms of like chart success or anything like that. But it just feels like to me the second half of the album, sort of as soon as she moves away from the cutting lyrics and the kind of directness of things like Man's World, which I think that's probably my favorite song on here, which feels like it's totally her. It's totally her speaking, and her way of performing. On that, I feel like as soon as it moves away into that and some of the slower more ballady songs, which are more like about a relationship, I just found that they were really lacking. And on a short record like this, where it's like 30 something minutes, 10 tracks, it just felt very lopsided towards the start. I'm glad I picked it, and I'm glad I listened to it. I'd probably say it is probably my favorite of hers, but I still don't think I am fully on board with her as
you've never been a huge fan then, really.
There's been songs that I've liked, and I feel like she's a dynamic performer. I think she's probably better on performing than she probably is on the records, from what I've kind of seen and what other people have said. But it didn't fully convert me like I was hoping. But yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a bit more reasonable than my review, I suppose, which is pretty harsh. So, Matt, what do you reckon?
I think Sam hit the nail on the head with the whole album, pretty much. The beginning, I was like, first time I put it on, I got very excited because the beginning is like, it's really cool. There's like a lot of interesting elements. It's very dynamic. Like the opening track feels like it's like super weird, synth wavy. It feel like I kept thinking it could like fit in the movie Tron or something like that, as like the theme for like a bad guy or something. And then it like some of the later songs shifted toward like in the opening. Some of the songs following that had moments that felt like also ABBA-y and things, I think, which I have a soft spot for ABBA and that kind of generation of music, of pop music. So I was like totally on board, but then it like completely shifted tone and went for these big ballads, these big like sentimental moments. But the way it was produced, like her voice was almost like hidden. It was like really like warped and like, I don't know, stretched in a weird way, so that it just felt like it disappeared. And I don't know, those ballads felt like there was no sincerity in them at all. There was no like fragility. It just felt kind of insincere, and I didn't really give a damn.
Okay.
So it's definitely like there's a couple of really cool songs in there, but it's by far and away not close to some of the best pop music that I've heard at all.
Okay.
So kind of disappointing.
I mean, you're in the middle somewhat then, aren't you? Sounds like Sam was a bit more favourable than you were. Maybe.
I don't know. I feel like everything Matt said there is probably accurate. That's kind of probably where I am. I don't think I hated any of it. Like I wasn't like really, but it just sort of, it was that massive difference in in the kind of the enjoyment I got out of it. Like those first few songs, and I felt the same. I was like, oh, this is it. This is finally the album I've been waiting for. And then it just sort of, it was like all of it had gone into those songs, and the rest of it just fell apart. Yeah.
Okay.
It felt almost like she wanted to do like what Billie Eilish has done with the like very like fast tempo, more aggressive songs, but then also be able to do the big ballads. But she doesn't have the same skills that she
it's
has.
not close, is it? Is that fair to say?
No.
We all agree on that?
Yeah.
In Billie Eilish and this? Yeah. Not similar in that sense, quality-wise.
No.
Okay, great. So let's see. We've got 2 left. Why doesn't Sam, when you pick your favourite of the remaining couple, we got Stevie Nicks, or we've got what's it called, Rostam.
Yeah.
Well, I'd probably say that Stevie Nicks was my favourite of these last 2.
Okay.
But I feel like what I have to say about it is probably less interesting.
Well, you got to say at some point, so you may as well get into it.
Because basically, to me, this Stevie Nicks record sounded exactly like I was expecting at every moment. There wasn't a single moment where I went, I'm not listening to this album that I hadn't heard before. And yet I knew exactly what it was, and there was no mistaking that this is Stevie Nicks at that exact point of her career, that exact point of Fleetwood Mac's career, which is not a bad thing. I enjoy that. I picked it because I really like Fleetwood Mac, and to me that kind of era of Rumours through to Tango in the Night, I find it really interesting the change that they kind of went through as a band, and then clearly as individuals, because.
So she did this while she was still in Fleetwood Mac in that initial phase, was she?
Yeah, so Fleetwood Mac, like the Rumours era and that kind of thing in the 70s, then they'd started to kind of not fall off, but it was kind of diminishing returns by that point. And I think it was like they were on tour and she'd already released her debut album while they were releasing the Fleetwood Mac records, and that had become bigger than the band.
Oh, right. That wasn't this album, though, you're saying?
No, so then this was her second one.
Okay, I see.
So this was the first one after they hadn't broken up, but they were on a break basically for a couple of years.
Right.
And it's so clear that she has her very own specific style that these songs sound like the Fleetwood Mac songs that Stevie Nicks sings. It's like Nightbird is basically Dreams too, and the other songs are very, very similar. But I think that just sort of proves. Then when they got back together again, they were like 4 different bands basically, and then the music was so separate because she'd clearly established her own sound, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't think it gave me anything new. I don't think I've learned anything new about her or about that time. I imagine she's probably holding things back because it sounds like if you know anything about her, it's obviously
stuff going on.
She's gone through a lot. She was obviously struggling with addiction and things like that at the time. But I liked the energy of it. It felt very much like a Stevie Nicks performance throughout. There was always this kind of like dramatic, theatrical sound to it, like this kind of performative. I'm giving everything I've got, and I feel like it actually stood out on this playlist for me because I feel like a lot of the things I was kind of missing that from elsewhere. This kind of gave me that real. Here is a real performer delivering. And whether or not you like the music, I felt like this was a true performance, and some of the other albums I don't think gave me that. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but it didn't give me anything I wasn't expecting.
Okay, Matt, do you want to go?
Sure.
Do you think?
I agree in a lot of ways with Sam. I think I also am quite fond of Fleetwood Mac. And so I was quite excited to listen to this and see how different it was. And I did think it was quite different, like in its tone is like Fleetwood Mac is still quite dark. but the music feels a little bit brighter than a lot of what's going on in here. And I did feel like the sound was also sounded a little bit more dated than some of the classic moments for Fleetwood Mac. But it is like, it's quintessentially her. Like, her voice is so iconic. You know, like, as soon as you listen to it, you know it's her. And I think the energy that she brings to the performance, like you were saying, it makes such a big difference, because there is a lot of what we listened to this month is almost ambivalent, and like, they don't care. And you get back to the discussion we had a couple of months ago about like dry cleaning, with its the performer just being very offhand with what they're talking about, and this is just the complete opposite. She's putting everything in. And I thought there was some really good moments in the album though. The Stand Back was my clear favorite. I really like the disco in it. It added a different dimension to what I've heard her do before. I thought that was super cool. But there were other moments where I was like Tom Petty I've never liked, and so I thought the song with Tom Petty was incredibly dreary, and it was just that one was hard to get through. So as an album as a whole, I was like, oh, I'm glad I listened to it. Most of it's good. And I like it just because it's Stevie Nicks. But there weren't that many songs which I was really blown away. And so like if I really want to listen to like premium Stevie Nicks, I'm not going to turn to this album. I'm going to turn
premium Stevie Nicks. I love it. Top tier.
Yeah, I'm going to turn to Fleetwood Mac and listen to that instead.
Okay.
It's weird. I picked this because I'd googled like best Stevie Nicks albums or something, and this was number one on every single list that I saw. I don't know if that's kind of a sign of what the quality of some of the other stuff, or I don't know. That's the reason I picked this one over other ones.
Right. Okay, so it's time for me to speak. So with some hesitation, this album is an absolute minefield for me. Give some context. My wife loves Stevie Nicks. Oh my God, she's totally obsessed with her. So that's the first problem for me. On the upside, she kind of gave up listening to this podcast a while ago because strangely she seems to think we're kind of negative, and she can't take it. So I don't think I'm as concerned about that as the fact that my mother-in-law, her mum, is next level on Stevie Nicks. Like, she's seen her like 30 times. She's completely obsessed. And I can't be sure that she won't take enough interest in when she hears about this being on the podcast to actually listen to the podcast and my review. So what I'm saying is,
if you're positive, it won't matter.
So in short, this is my new favourite artist. Fuck Portishead, PJ Harvey is a write-off. Radiohead, Pretenders, all of that shit. Dump it. So yeah, listening properly to this album, to her for the first time, really, even though I've been married for over 20 years, I've never really listened to my wife's favourite artist very much. I think that I like this album more than I thought I would. Its kind of strongest suit is sort of lyrical kind of cleverness, and the kind of way she can put together quite sort of I can't think of the word, like pithy kind of short phrasing that's sort of quite powerful and effective. So I thought that was quite quite one of its strongest suits and kind of quite effective. And they're often relationship narratives as well as you said, Sam. I knew a little about some of the difficulties that she was in to some extent around in the 70s and stuff. So I guess there's some of that stuff in there as well. But where it's let down is not really its fault. It's to me, it's the very, very dated production. You can't help this, although I say that some albums I think do sound fresh still, and they're this old. It sounds very dusty and kind of old, particularly the synth sounds. I really dislike the synth sounds almost every time they appeared. They were clearly trying to test out what was then cutting edge stuff, and it just sounded kind of squeaky and irritating. So that made it much harder for me to connect with the music. I think it would have been simpler I mean, it's fine. They're trying to break new ground, and that's full credit to them for that. But it would have been more effective for me if they'd just gone with a more stripped down, just acoustic guitar performances, say, and that would also have made it a little bit less clearly of the 70s, I think, or the late 70s, I guess. So I suppose it's interesting music, but I'm very, very afraid, I've got to say, I didn't really get into it that much. So apologies to Judy, my mother-in-law, if she listens to this. I'm terribly sorry. So yeah, that's my feelings about it. Yeah. So, okay, so that just leaves then one more, I think, which is Rostam. Is it Rostam? I can pronounce it correctly. Rostam, yeah? Change Phobia. So, Matt, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, I suggested this album because I'm a big Vampire Weekend fan. And he left Vampire Weekend a couple albums ago, I think. Not really sure. Not that much of a fan, I guess, if I'm not paying that much attention. But so, I was expecting something very Vampire Weekend adjacent, and it kind of is that, but it's a bit more dreamy. It's a bit more out there. There's a little bit more electronic elements to it. And so for half this record, I felt like there's some glitchy elements and some weird noises added into certain songs. So for those songs, it felt like he wanted to make something that was like Bon Iver. But then kind of also retain this indie boy sweetness from Vampire Weekend. And then he'd also make some songs following those, which are much more akin to just soaring summer indie vibes. And so it felt a little confusing. I was confused by this album of what he was aiming for. Did he want to make something a little weird and experimental, or did he want to make some really chill summer indie music? And so I spent most of the time listening to this album trying to figure out whether it's either or both.
Was it effective at either?
I don't think it was. I don't think it was you get back. So the thing I was thinking, you get to this name of changeophobia, and it felt like he wants to change, and he's afraid, and he's talking about relationships in one of the songs, but really it felt like his music, he wants to change, and do something different, and it's much more exciting, maybe, or much more experimental. But he can't shake off this just indie boy elements of his sound, for better or worse. Okay. So I was a little disappointed.
Right. Even though you picked it, yeah, but it's fair enough. If you're doing it blind, it's okay. Why don't I jump in? Or is that okay, Sam? I'll go next.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'll give some context for this one as well. I hated Vampire Weekend. I think it's absolutely preppy shite. I never liked anything they ever did. I didn't like their style. It was just awful. I hated it. So to me, this is far better than any of their stuff. There were still bits of it that were felt a bit sort of throwaway, to be honest. And I think, again, like I said with another one of the albums earlier, this is positioned. That is even harder for this album. This is positioned on the playlist directly after American Negro, which is a pretty hard and just change of gear to deal with, to go from that to this. So sometimes it felt a bit sort of throwaway, sort of 2D kind of music. Like Kinney, I think was one of the tracks I was particularly thought that was the case with. I wasn't into, but I think, giving him some credit for the fact that it's in that position. There were some other tracks I did enjoy, like Forerunner was probably my favourite on the album. I thought it had a good amount of energy, but it also did, as Matt was implying, have a few sort of very delicate experimental touches to it. I mean, it's nothing extreme, it's not Arca or something, but something that was a little bit unusual, and I enjoyed that. So it's kind of in a way for me, it's kind of a mixed bag, all in all. But I suppose if this kind of keeps him busy enough not to go back to Vampire Weekend and resuscitate that project, then it'll all be worth it. Because I just don't want to hear any music from them ever again.
Oh, they're very much carrying on without him.
Oh dear.
So don't worry, you can still get your Vampire Weekend fix.
I think they've been like bigger since, haven't they?
Yeah,
the last
probably.
album was huge.
Yeah.
What a sad story. So yeah, that's my feelings on him. I thought it was okay. Sam, go for it.
So this is very much on paper. This is very much my thing of like that kind of hybrid of like indie meets electronic meets this meets that, and I had no context of this. I didn't recognize his name. I like Vampire Weekend, but I'm not like a big fan, so I had no idea who he was. And then I got like 2 tracks in and I went, this sounds exactly like the Haim record from last year. And then I googled it and he produced the Haim record from last year.
Really?
And that thought then is all I could think about for the rest of the month listening to this. Because
Did we do that album, Matt, on the podcast? I can't remember. Did we do it?
No.
Did we cover it? No. Okay, fair enough.
don't
Sorry, I'm
think
just
so.
rubbing you, Sam. Yeah.
I don't think honestly, go and listen to the song Summer Girl from that album and you will know instantly. I'm sure it's the same saxophone player. It is the same. The saxophone and that use of it is across the entire of that album.
Right.
And this is so nowhere near the level for me that album does that stuff, and it is entirely down to his performance as a singer and a performer. I just found that as much as I enjoyed the production, there was some songs I really, really liked the production on. Like you mentioned Forerunner, I thought that was the best track as well. And from the back of the cab, I thought I really liked the glitchiness and that kind of like you didn't really know what was happening and it was all a bit frantic. But I found that really interesting. And then he would sing, and I'm like, "Do you want to be here? Do you want? Does this mean anything to you?" Like, and then knowing that there's a song Next Thing near the end, and that is the Haim record. There's no chance that isn't, because I checked the credits, and Danielle Haim plays drums on pretty much every song here. And knowing that she's there, and going, why is she not performing this song? It would be so much better. She would have so much more energy, so much more like kind of commitment to the lyrics, because clearly the lyrics mean something to him. But it just felt like he didn't care. And I just didn't get him as a performer. He's so clearly a producer, a member of a band, but he's not a front man. And that was what kind of stopped me from really getting on board with it. As an album fully, because I really, really liked the production, and there was lots on here that I should really like, but I just couldn't help shake the feeling that someone else could perform this so much better than he is.
Right.
Which feels mean, because this is clearly his own project and stuff.
That's right. We do mean quite a bit. Don't worry about it.
But,
fine. Fitting
but
right
this should have been far and away my favorite album of all of them on this list, and that it just prevented it from being that, because it's so my thing. Yeah.
So in that case, that's all of them, but the Why I Love. So in that case, what was your favorite on this of these 5?
I don't even know. Like I was really happy when all of them came in and I listened to them for the first time, because I went, oh, there's nothing I really don't like. There's nothing I hate. Because usually there's something, and knowing what you guys are like, music tastes often don't cross over.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
But there was something I enjoyed about everything. But I think the one I found myself going back to listen to would be the Marina one. But I think I would have listened to that anyway. And I don't know if that just all of those albums kind of just fit together. So the Stevie Nicks is probably the one I enjoyed the most.
Okay. So did it feel like a middling kind of list then overall, would you say?
Yeah, there wasn't anything I really disliked. There wasn't anything that like blew me away.
Right. Yeah. I'd probably agree with that. I mean, there was. I would say the Rostam was probably the thing I would be most likely to come back to, or maybe American Negro. But nothing blew me away, as you said, Sam. It was there was some good stuff, there was some weak stuff. I think the Marina was the thing I liked least. Again, not surprisingly, but even that I didn't absolutely hate. So yeah. What do you think then, Matt, about the whole list?
I agree with both you guys. There was no album I was excited to listen to.
We're going to have a quota of agreement on this podcast, I think, and like tick that off, because we can't have this much level of agreement. It's not acceptable.
No.
Yeah.
But there were definitely there's lots of high points in the playlist. It's just they'd last for one track, and then or they'd be part of a song. And then you'd be like, oh, okay, now I've got to wait another couple tracks before I can get excited again. Which is a shame.
Yeah, that is pretty.
But like you say, there wasn't anything that I really didn't like the Gruff Rhys. So
okay, that's the lowest of the list for you.
Yeah.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah, it wasn't hate, but it was really just I felt so tired after listening to it every time.
Okay, so that just moves us to the Wild Love. So, Sam, you're going to introduce Janelle Monae. Go for it.
Yeah, I was really struggling to come up with who to pick. I wanted to pick someone that I thought would be kind of different to the other choices I made. I don't know if this is, but I'd always thought in my head that I'll pick Janelle Monae if I go back on, because I just think for me she's kind of like last decade, the 2010s. She's probably like the most exciting new artist for me. For that whole time, she released 3 albums in that time, and for the whole decade, kind of just there was no one like her, and I still don't think there is anyone like her as a kind of artist in the pop space, in the R&B space, in the whatever space she finds herself in. But yeah, so I first heard Janelle Monae. It would have been like during one of those times where I go like, well, I need to listen to all of the great music because I've listened to loads of rubbish recently. So like this is like in 2010, and her album The Archandroid had just come out. It came out to huge rave reviews. She released a couple of things, a couple of singles, but the album kind of was suddenly this critical darling. So I think I had it like ready on a list to listen to for ages, and finally got around to it, and it just blew me away. And I don't think I don't think I'll ever feel that kind of immediacy with an album like that, where it's such a huge, extensive piece of work. It's like 2 suites with like orchestral introductions to each suite, and it's a concept album about an android who's on the run because she falls in love with a human and then becomes this kind of like all of the other things. She's against the code of the android. It's so weird.
Surely that's not more exciting than a concept album about a mountain. I just want to interject.
I mean, nothing could be. But yeah, so it's just so out there, and yet the music is just so infectiously funky and classic. It sounds like all of her music kind of sounds like it's been here forever. It's like these classic artists that she kind of aspires to be, and it feels like over that decade she sort of reached that point where she could be classed alongside them, alongside Prince, alongside James Brown, alongside these people that she's so clearly influenced by. And for our generation, she is that. Whether she's kind of at that kind of scale of kind of people known about her. I mean, now she's a huge name across film and kind of activism, and I think what I find most interesting about her as an artist is that for her first 2 like studio albums, she was very, very she never wanted to kind of open up like personally about things. So all of her songs are very much, this is singing about something that isn't me. Even though you can hear so much emotion in some of the songs, and the lyrics are so clearly written from a point of view of her, but she does them in a way so they're not specific. And then there's like a turning point where she suddenly realized that actually it's a better thing to be able to share her own experience. She's a queer black woman, and that unique experience needs to be told. So then the third album, Dirty Computer, is so personal to her and so clearly about her own experiences growing up and about feeling like an outsider and how that is. And I feel like now she's this kind of like triple, quadruple threat in this sense. She's starring in Oscar-winning films, starring in all sorts of things, and then also delivering headline performances on Glastonbury and things like that. Like she's kind of, for me, is one of the kind of performers of the decade. And yeah, I tried to make a playlist that sort of covered all of those bases.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually, if you don't mind. I want to ask about the order of the playlist that we had conversation before.
So I've really, really tried to... part of me was really tempted to just pick her debut album, but there's so many songs since then that I thought, no, these are like her classics, that I couldn't just stick a whole album on. And that would have actually been longer than the whole playlist anyway. But I started with those opening tracks from that album, and those first three songs... all kind of blend into each other, and that instantly grabbed me because I just love that sort of thing. So that was intentional. But then I sort of jump around a bit between her three albums, and I think there's an extra song that was from a film from last year or the year before, something like that. Turntables. But I try to include bits from all of her albums as well as their original EP, and I included the intro song for that, which isn't really a song and must have sounded so confusing when you listen to the playlist, because it's just her talking about kind of like, she says like, hey cyber boys and cyber girls, something, I'm trying to think what the actual thing is she says, but it's just her like introducing this idea of this like android being on the run. And I just wanted to include that to give that kind of bonkers context of what her records are like. Like you open the CD, there's credits, but it's like the middle section is written as if it's like a statement from the mayor of the city or something, talking about this person and this document from this woman, Janelle Monae, but then this android, Cindy Mayweather. And it's just so weird, but so interesting alongside this music that's so kind of fluid and out there. So yeah, I tried to get kind of a nice flow, and then the last song, Americans, that's the last song of her last album. So that felt like a nice finale for a playlist. But yeah.
So that's great. Maybe I'll just jump in and say a couple of things, Matt.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I'm really glad you introduced her to me. I've heard a lot about her, but somehow, you get that artist where they're sort of circling around what they're doing. You never kind of get either an opportunity or you never quite get to connect with it. So it's great to have some time to sit with this. And I thought overall, I really enjoyed it. Actually, I thought it was weird, as you've just described, in a really interesting ways, which I always really like. In fact, it's maybe a strange analogy musically, but there's a clipping album, everyone's heard me talk about clipping a lot before, called Misery and Splendor, which is about set in the future, about a slave in a spaceship who escapes on another ship and kind of flies into deep space alone to escape slavery in the future. So it's kind of fascinating similarity in terms of how odd that narrative is, and that kind of science fiction put into genres of music that maybe you wouldn't actually think would suit it. Sort of the theatricality of that. So that drew me in quite a lot. So I enjoyed that as well. I also thought the sort of political statements that were in there, the kind of implicit or explicit political statements, were interesting and sort of subtle. And I think this is where that Marina album we were talking about earlier, I'm not suggesting you would think they were the same level of Sam at all, since you just said she was the greatest artist of the last decade or whatever, but the Marina, the political and sort of cultural statements made in the Marina album seem so weak compared to Janelle Monae's sort of the level that she was working at with that. Kind of left it behind as well. So it was. I really mostly enjoyed it, and I'll go back to it more. Is there one you think this first one is the one I should dig into more? Arch Android.
To be honest, if you're gonna listen, I would listen. The first, she had an EP, then 2 studio albums, which are set as like 5 suites. So there's like an intro to the suite, and then so they're meant to continue the story.
Okay.
But if you're gonna listen to anything, listen to Arch Android. That's kind of to me that's her best album as an album.
Yeah.
But honestly, all of her albums are worth listening to. She's only had 3 full-length stuff.
Right.
So,
I mean, the good thing for me as well, I suppose, is it redeems me slightly from my comments and the general perception of me as not knowing or being connected to anything to do with dance or that kind of level of energy in music. You know, I found this really intriguing and interesting and engaging, and it was often quite energetic and obviously electronic in certain ways and stuff. So it's something I suppose might not naturally obviously be my kind of thing, but I was really into it. Yeah. So thank you for introducing it.
No, that's fine. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Are you surprised by my reaction?
No, I actually thought you would enjoy it because it's weird that like early on she kept being placed in that kind of neo soul section of like as genre, and it never made any sense to me. And it was like, yes, she's had a song with Erykah Badu, but that doesn't mean that it's like this is funk pop. It's like it's like Prince, and you would never describe Prince as anything other than pop. That's clearly her closest kind of thing for I would say of an artist, especially when you see her perform. She's pretty much based her performance style on Prince.
So there's hope for me in terms of actually liking a pop artist then, basically.
I would say this. She's the one of a pop artist for you. Definitely.
Okay, great. That's good to know. So Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, Nick, if you didn't like this, I would be. I think.
Oh, you weren't surprised at all. You thought.
I'm not surprised. Her music's undeniable. I think it's so interesting. There's so much going on, and she is just like you were saying, Sam. She's the complete package. Like, she can do everything. And she has a vision for everything.
What's her acting stuff been then? By the way, I'm not.
She was in Moonlight, and she was in Hidden Figures. They're her 2 biggest things.
I love Moonlight. I don't remember Hidden Figures, but Moonlight was amazing. Yeah.
There's a movie that just came out or was postponed, like a horror movie. I forgot what it's called. But that's actually how I came to listen to her. I saw her in Hidden Figures, like 5 years ago. I was like pretty blown away by her performance. Knew it was Janelle Monae and was like, I've heard of her as a musician, so I started listening at that point. So I was pretty like relatively late to the game. But then
not as late as me, evidently.
No.
Not a surprise.
I think for me, my favorite work that she's done is her most recent one, Dirty Computer. I think that is it's just ridiculously good. And I remember when I saw her perform at the Grammys, performing
Make Me Feel.
It's Make Me Feel. Yeah, Make Me Feel. And I was just obsessed with that because it was just so. Like I said, she has such vision for how she comes across and what the project is.
I don't remember that. Oh, we did have that on the playlist. Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't see it for a sec. Yeah, I remember the one. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
Yeah. It's just, like you said, she has it all just kind of completely dialed in. And I think your comparisons are complete. Like, she deserves to be much bigger than she is because she is an artist that, like, transcends genre, transcends even music. Like your comparison to Prince, I think is like, she 100% is drawing so much from Prince. But I think it also reminds me of like the way she builds these concepts and the way that she does kind of evolve. Reminds me also of like artists like David Bowie and the way she's just drawing in from everywhere. And like also these concepts, like it's all like very sci-fi based. It's very It's like all this cyborgs and androids and all of that. It's very much in my wheelhouse as well. So to hear it all mixed together is just fantastic. And so like specifically with the playlist, I have listened to her previous albums in the past, but it was really good to have like some specific songs to really dig into, because I found I went back, listened to some of her previous albums, but then really just got into her most recent one and have just listened to that almost exclusively for a while. So it was really good to get like an excuse to go back and listen to some of the older ones. And I didn't realize like Turntables was completely new to me, and I really, really like that song. The way that the beat bounces around in it is really, really fun.
Yeah, so, it feels like quite a different. It feels very different to a lot of her other stuff as well. I quite liked that it was very different to the previous album, and so it kind of stands alone. But yeah, it feels very much kind of like a call to arms kind of moment for her.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see where she goes next, because like a lot of what she's done in the past has been very like themed, and there's always been this like a sci-fi element, or like I forget the word, but yeah, like almost like a historical
high concept stuff. You mean?
Yeah, super high concept, and so to switch gears and going forward, it will be super interesting to see where she goes.
That's great. So, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I'm interested, Nick, what you picked out as like songs that you really liked, though.
I suppose it was actually the stuff at the start. Those first 3 or 4, I did like Make Me Feel. Actually, now that was one I sort of blanked on when you said the name, but yeah, that was actually one I was really into. I think as well, I'm just looking down the list. Django Jane. Off Dirty Computer I can see here, so not the same album. Probably another one that was a high point. Yeah, I mean it was consistent though. It was nothing really I hated on it at all. Nothing I thought wasn't wasn't worth listening to again. So yeah. What was that? Do you think it's all consistently same quality, Sam, all the way through?
No, it's just there's different stuff in there. Like I think. Like the songs like Django Jane is a good example where it's kind of a lot more like rap based, and those sort of ones I feel like stand out quite a lot next to some of the funkier pop stuff. Okay. Just interested to see where you fell on that.
That would make sense then, wouldn't it? I suppose. Yeah. So it's kind of logical. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm looking back over it, and I'm becoming quite concerned now that we've agreed fairly consistently across the whole playlist. So. We need to have some kind of kick-off fight right now, quickly, before we end the podcast. Otherwise, people are going to start to wonder what the hell our point is. But no, it's been a good to get through this list, and again, introducing the Janelle Monae was a great idea, Sam. So thank you.
Good.
Despite that, though, Sam,
best thing on the playlist. By a long way.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. But despite introducing that, Sam, you are now fired because for the next podcast, we will be having James coming in instead. So we're going to rotate through the different editors, and James will be up next time. So the way we're going to do it is I've picked one for next time, and Matt picked one, and then Franz still kept a pick, even though he's not even going to be on it. So and then James picks 3 himself. So I've got Dean Blunt's Black Metal 2. Is my pick. Matt?
I picked Laurent Mvula with Pink Noise.
Fran then picked Calais with The Waves Part 1. James has picked Stubborn Heart with Made of Static. His classic is Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation. And he's going to do a Wire Love, I assume, playlist about New Young Pony Club, who I've never heard of at all. I've never heard of at all.
You're going to love it.
Really? No, I'm not. You're lying. So yeah, that's what we have next time. Thank you very much, Sam, for coming on. And we will obviously see you. We'll see you at the Mercury one, won't we? In a couple of months' time. So you'll be back.
Couple months.
Yeah.
As long as you don't remove any songs from the
no
album
more making playlists.
In order to make a playlist of the songs you prefer, because that's
I'm still
just
ashamed.
a no-no.
I feel like I've completely destroyed any credibility that I may have.
Yeah.
by doing that.
Yeah, that's correct. That's dead right. Yeah, go hang your head in shame.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's everything. Go to the website right now, everybody, please, immediately, and read everything on it. Since we've been publishing 4 articles a week for, a year and a half or something, 2 years? There's quite a bit there. So, yeah.
2.5 years.
2.5 years, is it? Fucking hell. So, yeah, go and read everything right now. That's a commandment from here.
Pickybees.com.
Pickybees.com. Pickybs.com. The social media channels, I've got no chance of remembering, so if anyone else does, you're welcome to say what they are. But without Fran here, it's not going to happen. Sam,
you can find them on the website.
Exactly. That's the best way of doing it, yeah. Okay, I think that's everything then. So thanks again, Sam. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
All right, bye. Bye.